This includes events such as our webinar series, our annual conference, and additional ad hoc courses and workshops. This year, we also started doing monthly happy hours where we discuss in a really low stress environment kind of what we're facing in the field and share some best practices. If you're interested, I'm going to put my email in the chat box as we get started today, and I encourage you to reach out. We also do a lot of work through lobbying for emergency management legislation and of course, those networking events as well. I encourage you to check out our Twitter, Facebook, and webinar LinkedIn pages listed as IAEM Region 1 for more information following today's session. One quick plug, too, don't forget to register for the IAEM annual conference in Grand Rapids this year. It runs from October 15th to the 22nd with all kinds of pre- and post-conference trainings and networking and all of that. All right, now, to kick us off, a big welcome and thank you to Barb Clark, who is speaking to us today about all things USAR canines. Barb Clark has been the training and exercise manager for the Intermountain Center for Disaster Preparedness since retiring from the fire service in 2013. Over her career, she's worked in emergency services in Utah and Idaho as both a fire captain, training officer, safety officer, and paramedic. During her tenure with the Boise Fire Department, Barb specialized in fire grounds medical rehab and triage for mass casualty events. She also has an undergraduate degree from the University of Utah and numerous certifications in emergency medical services and emergency management, including ASME technician, state and federal instructor, and master exercise practitioner. Currently, Ms. Clark is serving as a canine handler with the Utah FEMA Urban Search and Rescue Team, UTTF-1, and is an affiliate instructor with the University of Utah's Emergency Services Department, teaching applied anatomy and physiology and emergency management courses. She does it all, folks. So as we progress through her presentation, feel free to drop any questions you have in the question box. And of course, we'll open the session up to questions at the end of our presentation. Just to note that we are recording today's webinar in case the colleagues want to watch the presentation after this session. And I promise I will stop talking now and turn it over to our wonderful speaker, Ms. Barb Clark, for her presentation. So Barb, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Taylor, for that introduction, and thanks, everyone, for joining us. I just have to apologize. We are having some technical difficulties in this virtual world. I think everybody's kind of gotten used to having something pop up from time to time, but I have never used this platform before, and unfortunately, we could not get my video to work on it. So, not that you have to see me. I have plenty of pictures in here that will hopefully keep your attention, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them during the presentation if you would like, but I'm going to count on Taylor or someone to tell me if you raise your hand or have an immediate question, because I can also not see that. But otherwise, we will do a Q&A at the end as well. So Taylor pretty much covered who I am and what I do. In my full-time job, I am the training and exercise manager for the Intermountain Center for Disaster Preparedness. And that organization is dedicated to creating different types of training programs, things like this, as well as pretty much anything in the emergency management realm. We offer courses for that. We also help organizations put together exercises and drills, and we help them create their plans in addition to doing research throughout the EM world and especially in the disaster preparedness world. So that's my day job. But I got to tell you, my big passion is these four-legged critters that I get to work with pretty much on a daily basis. Utah does not go out on a lot of USAR deployments because we are situated in an area of the country that does not get a lot of natural or man-made disasters, luckily. But you know, we do often get sent out to help people, especially along the coast. I've been a canine handler. We just realized my dog that I'm standing with here in this picture, he just turned 11 on the 18th of this month. So I've been doing this work for about 12 years, and I tell you, it is such a joy to work with these guys. But I thought I'd share with you today a little bit about What makes a good search and rescue dog, whether it's a USAR dog or an urban search and rescue, or simply a SAR dog, which is just stands for search and rescue canine. So I choose my dogs as puppies. I prefer to get them before they've picked up bad habits, but SAR dogs, USAR dogs can be taught to have all of the skills that they need to be successful at this pretty much from birth to about 2 years old. After about 2 years old, it's hard to really train them into what we want them to be. But when I choose my dogs as puppies, I like to get them somewhere between 8 and 12 weeks. And the reason for that is that when you leave a dog with their litter longer than about 12 weeks of age, they get incredibly dependent on their family, and they sometimes, not always, but sometimes have a bit of difficulty becoming very independent on their own. And that's one of the things that we really need for our dogs to be a good USAR canine, is that they have to be able to work independently and not be so attached to their handler that they can't go off and do things like, if I tell my dog he needs to go down that tube or down that tunnel to make access to a collapsed building, he needs to be confident enough and comfortable enough to do that on his own. And if he can't, if he's attached, we call it mommyitis, if he's so attached to me that he can't leave, then that's not a good thing, because there are times when I can't go into a situation that we do send our dogs in, and I'll talk more about that here in just a minute. So there's a couple of drives that we need to have from our dogs. The two primary ones are the prey and the hunt drive. Ideally, we want the dog to have both of these drives, and I'll explain what those are here in just a second. A prey drive is a real visual drive. It's when the dog, say, chases a squirrel. You know, it sees a cat running across the driveway and it wants to chase after it. That's really a prey drive. Whereas a hunt drive is very olfactory. It's when they use their nose. It's when they want to continue to search even if they can't see the object. And that is super important for any type of SAR work. And I should just probably give you a little bit of a disclaimer here. Most of these pictures are of my dogs. Those first two pictures were of my older dog, Raffi, and this picture is of my pup, Phelan. You're going to see a lot of both of them. I tried to throw a couple of other dogs in there, but it was just easier to grab my own pictures for this. So anyway, continuing on with the drives. Another drive that we really want to see with our dogs is a play drive. It's really important that they are happy to play, and you think, oh, every dog's happy to play. Well, that's not always the case. I wish it were, but it is not always the case. Play for these dogs is their work. And if a dog will play, if it will interact comfortably in social situations with other dogs and other animals, they usually are fairly comfortable. Again, going back to that independence that they have, they're usually very comfortable in social situations if they have that independence and confidence. And usually if a dog has a strong prey drive, it will usually, and I keep saying usually, it will help to overcome their aggression and fear. And most dogs have an aggressive side because they get fearful. So when a dog has a really strong play drive, they tend to not be as aggressive because a lot of their energy goes into that play. And play is reward for our dogs. So when we're training our dogs, we reward them by playing. And you can see this picture here of Phelan playing with another handler as a reward for a good find. So that's super important for our dogs because they wouldn't get a reward if they didn't love to play. Dogs also have to have really strong nerve strength. This is Raffi teetering. He kind of walked across this area here. These are trailers for trucks. He also, one of my favorite things that I saw him do one time, wasn't my favorite at the time, but he was searching a pile and there was a big culvert that was upright, and he jumped up on this culvert. We thought there was a lid on it. There turned out to not be a lid on it, and he literally walked around the lip of this culvert, which was about an inch and a half thick concrete, and then he was able to find his way off of that. But had he not had one, nerve strength, he might have kind of freaked out and he could have fallen, and that fall would have been about 15 feet, which definitely would have been problematic in that it might have actually injured him significantly. So nerve strength, absolutely an important characteristic. And then one of the other things that's really important is that the dogs have to be manageable and driven and have all those other drives in them, but they also have to be have a docile side. They have to be able to be socialized. And this is my granddaughter decorating my dogs for Easter a couple of years, or I guess that was last year, but they have to be docile enough that they will allow that, but yet dominant enough that they can then go into pretty much any situation that they need to and act, accordingly, searching for what we need them to search for. Some of you, I'm sure some of you have dogs. Some dogs, I call them soft dogs. They can, maybe they got into the garbage and the minute you walk in the door, they bow their head and they run under the couch and they're cowering. That to me is a very soft dog, versus the exact opposite of that would be you walk in the door, there's garbage all over the floor, and the first thing you want to do is yell at the dog, and the dog just stands there looking at you very defiantly. That dog might be a little too hard. We want a dog that's kind of in the middle, that might maybe, run away, but will kind of look at you and then come back because they want your love and attention. So, somehow or another, you have to find the kind of medium for a successful SAR candidate. There's a lot of different evaluations out there. Because I tend to get my dogs as puppies, I like the Volhardt's test, and this tests for disposition, but there's other dog evaluations that are out there. One of the examples of the Volhardt's test would be to have someone kind of playing with the puppy. And again, we test this somewhere between maybe about 10 weeks to 16 weeks. This is a good test. As a dog gets older, this one's not quite as good of a test, but somewhere in that earlier time frame. One of the things that you would do is, say, have someone play with your puppy and then throw a can filled with coins into the middle of the play and then see what the dog does. Too soft a dog is going to run away and not want to come back. Too hard a dog might go and try to rip up the object that got thrown in. Where what I like, the kind of dogs I like and the kind of handler that I am, I prefer to have a dog that may, he may jump back for a second, but then he goes in and investigates and then maybe even starts to play with that object. So that's just one of the examples of an evaluation that we do. So that's mainly for disposition of the dog. Other tests that you can do are for possessiveness or aggression, a dog's willfulness. But if you're interested in that, I can take that offline and talk about that a little more later. All right, so as you can well imagine, there's a whole lot of training that goes into keeping your SAR dog, not only getting them ready, but keeping them ready to be deployed. Just as an aside, this is from Fresh Kills in New York. This is where they took a lot of the debris from 9/11, and then this was searched multiple times as well. And when we do search this pile, there are times when pretty much this has been cleaned up since then, but there are times when there's still some residual there. All right, Our dogs are athletes, pretty much like a human athlete. It's not just their noses that work. Obviously, their whole bodies have to work, and they have to be conditioned to make sure that they don't get injuries because they're not conditioned. We make sure that our dogs work on their endurance as well as their speed and agility. We also work a lot on their flexibility and their strength. This picture is a little bit hard to tell, but that's about a 6-foot leap that this dog is doing on this, and they wouldn't be able to do it if it weren't for the fact that they are well conditioned dogs. There's a couple of organizations that have really focused on canine conditioning, both the Penn Vet Working Dog Center out of the University of Pennsylvania, as well as the Texas A&M Veterinary School. They've developed different programs that work not only on endurance, but core strength, balance, flexibility. As you can see, there's a dog working on a treadmill. That's real common, especially as a dog is rehabbing. One of the things that we found that's super important is dog flexibility. And I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this picture of the yellow lab turning his nose towards his hip there, that's a really great stretch for a dog. Obviously, you would have to do that on both sides, but that comes into play really importantly when a dog's up on a very unstable rubble pile, that they have, that they're not going to, tear a hip flexor or something like that. So just like us humans, it's really important to maintain that flexibility. And this is why our dogs need strength and flexibility and nerve strength and all these different things, because sometimes we have to put them up in the air. They have to have a very calm countenance when we do this. There's times when, they're getting lowered and raised with us. There's times when they're getting lowered and raised by themselves. So if you can imagine, if the dog gets all wiggly and squiggly, that could put not only them in jeopardy, but, also their handler in jeopardy. This one with the guy in the red, they're actually coming off of a helicopter. So you can imagine how important it is for the dog to remain calm and relaxed in that type of a situation. Not only do the dogs have to have all of these characteristics, but so do the handlers. The handlers have to have great endurance, great strength, and also have good nerve strength. This picture of Raffi is on this right side, he is actually looking into a hole that we have a victim buried in. Over here is another one of the dogs looking into this hole on the left side, where you can actually see a victim is buried in there, completely buried, that they couldn't get out on their own if they had to. So the handlers can't have any kind of claustrophobic feelings whatsoever, because this is how we train. This is how we make sure our dogs can figure out how to find their victims, and we'll talk about how they do that in a second here. This is just a picture of Raffi and I at a fire. I used to take him to work with me from the time he was a baby, and one of the reasons I did that was to get him accustomed to sights and sounds and smells. The guys would be checking out, a saw in the morning, and, you'd hear this, and loud noises. At a fire, you'd have all kinds of popping noises, sometimes explosions. You'd have this smell. We wouldn't send our dog in to search in an active fire, obviously. That would be silly because they don't have protective gear. And we can't put respirators on our dogs because their nose is their tool. But just getting them acclimated to these types of situations is really important for them in their learning process. So as a USAR canine, there's a couple of different certifications that they have to go through. They have two primary certifications. One is called the Fundamental Skills Assessment and Assessment Exam, or FSA, and then the other one is their certification exam. Both are 3-year certifications, and the dogs can take them once they hit at least 18 months old. They usually, most of our dogs last between 12 years old and 10 and 12 years old, which means that they can usually go through 2 or 3 cycles of certifications. After about 10 to 12, depending on the dog, and you see we usually use mid-sized to large dogs, which don't tend to have the really long lifespans. Most of these dogs, after about 10 or 12 years old, they need to retire and live a happy life as a couch dog or, just a companion dog. Here's just some other examples of the certification exam, or this is actually the FSA, these first 2 pictures with the black lab and then Raffi. He's barking at a bark barrel, and what that helps train the dog for is to have victim loyalty. So sometimes like I said earlier, we send our dogs up into a rubble pile that we as the handlers can't access, because the engineer has said it's not really stable for us to send you up there if there's not going to be any fines. And so sometimes we'll send our dogs up, and then the engineer will say, okay, you have reasonable belief that there is someone up there, so we're going to send 1 or 2 of you up. So the dog could actually be up there barking for, I don't know, a couple of minutes before we actually get a handler up there with them or a rescue specialist up there. So it's important that they have this commitment to their victims. So that's what we're training with that bark barrel there. And then obviously balance and agility with the teeter-totter. They have to not freak out when the teeter moves. They have to learn to control that movement. And it's really cool to watch that, to have that occur. All right, I have a couple of videos here. Fingers crossed that they will play. This first video is how dogs actually see the world. Dogs' eyesights are totally different than humans. So let's see if this runs. And IAEM folks, whoever's watching this, please let me know if it doesn't or if you can't hear the audio.
Hey guys, my name's Dale, and welcome to a special Monday collaboration video made possible with the help of plethrons. So, let's learn something. Now, dogs have been credited for being man's best friend, and even though we're not all dog people, and women can have dogs as best friends too, scientifically speaking, dogs are quite interesting. When it comes to the vision that dogs have, most people have the misconception that dogs can only see in black and white. And other than that, most people are left in the dark about what kind of vision dogs actually have. You see what I did there, plethrons? You learn from the best. Now, vision in most organisms is made possible through the teamwork of cones, rods, and ganglion cells. Rods themselves are in charge of being able to register light and dark, while cones are able to register color and being able to perceive it. Now, for comparative purposes, the human eye has about 6 million cone receptors concentrated in a little indent known as the fovea. Around the fovea, the human eye has about 120 million rod receptors. And if you know numbers, that's quite a difference. On the other hand, dogs have only 1,200,000 cone receptors in the back of their eye, which is about 20% that of what humans have. And they also lack a fovea. But dogs do have more rods within their eyes than humans do. And even though it's hard to get an exact number on how many they have exactly, we do know that their eyes are 5 times more sensitive to light than that of humans. When it comes to color vision, the average human has trichromacy unless they're colorblind. This means we have cone receptors within our eyes that are able to receive one of 3 colors: red, green, or blue. Trichromacy gives us the ability to see about 1 million different shades of colors, in contrast to a dog's color vision. Dogs have dichromacy, meaning they only have cone receptors that are able to pick up 2 different colors, blue and yellow. This means that dogs, and any other animal that has dichromacy, can only perceive about 10,000 different colors. This is why when you go to competitions that involve dogs, the obstacles tend to be blue and yellow colors. Interestingly enough though, dogs cannot perceive the color red at all, but the most popular color for dog toys is, guess it, red. So it's actually a better idea to buy dogs blue and yellow toys because they have a hard time being able to identify red objects anywhere near green things like grass, for instance. But even though that's a bit of a disadvantage, dogs do have some advantages over humans, such as their field of vision. Most dog breeds have about 250 degrees of vision, in contrast to humans who only have about 190 degrees of vision. And not only do they have the capability to see more, but they also have better night vision. This is due to a combination of having more rods than humans, having larger pupils than us, as well as having a tapetum. The tapetum acts like a mirror within the dog's eye, so once light enters the eye, it reflects back and forth, giving the eye more of ability to absorb photons and in turn being able to see things in the dark. This also gives them shiny eyes when you take pictures of them. And the increased amount of rods also gives them better motion detection than humans. But probably the best thing going for humans is that we on average can see further than dogs. The average human has 20/20 vision and the average dog has 20/80 vision. This means that a dog would have to be 20 feet away from something to see it just as clearly as we could 80 feet away. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is today's collaboration video. My question for you guys is if you could trade your vision for a dog's vision, would you? And or do you know how good your...
All right. I know that doesn't necessarily have to do with SAR work, but I think it's really interesting how dogs see, and it really does affect how we send our dogs out. A lot of people, believe that dogs can see better at night, and there's some proof for you and the why of that. All right, I have one other video because dogs' senses are so important, not just how they see the world, but also how they scent the world. So this is a cute little video that will give you some background on how dogs smell. And oops, sorry, obviously there we go.
Hi, Bob. Morning, Kelly. The tulips look great. Have you ever wondered how your dog experiences the world? Here's what she sees. Not terribly interesting. But what she smells, that's a totally different story. And it begins at her wonderfully developed nose. As your dog catches the first hints of fresh air, her nose's moist, spongy outside helps capture any scents the breeze carries. The ability to smell separately, with each nostril, smelling in stereo, helps to determine the direction of the smell's source, so that within the first few moments of sniffing, the dog starts to become aware of not just what kinds of things are out there, but also where they're located. As air enters the nose, a small fold of tissue divides it into two separate folds, one for breathing and one just for smelling. This second airflow enters a region filled with highly specialized olfactory receptor cells, several hundred millions of them, compared to our 5 million. And unlike our clumsy way of breathing in and out through the same passage, dogs exhale through slits at the side of their nose, creating swirls of air that help draw in new odor molecules and allow odor concentration to build up over multiple sniffs. But all that impressive nasal architecture wouldn't be much help without something to process the loads of information the nose scoops up. And it turns out that the olfactory system, dedicated to processing smells, takes up many times more relative brain area in dogs than in humans. All of this allows dogs to distinguish and remember a staggering variety of specific scents, at concentrations up to 100 million times less than what our noses can detect. If you can smell a spritz of perfume in a small room, a dog would have no trouble smelling it in an enclosed stadium and distinguishing its ingredients to boot. And everything in the street, every passing person or car, any contents of the neighbor's trash, each type of tree, and all the birds and insects in it, has a distinct odor profile telling your dog what it is, where it is, and which direction it's moving in. Besides being much more powerful than ours, a dog's sense of smell can pick up things that can't even be seen at all. A whole separate olfactory system, called the vomeral nasal organ, above the roof of the mouth, detects the hormones all animals, including humans, naturally release. It lets dogs identify potential mates or distinguish between friendly and hostile animals. It alerts them to our various emotional states, and it can even tell them when someone is pregnant or sick. Because olfaction is more primal than other senses, bypassing the thalamus to connect directly to the brain structures involving emotion and instinct, we might even say a dog's perception is more immediate and visceral than ours. But the most amazing thing about your dog's nose is that it can traverse time. The past appears in tracks left by passers-by and by the warmth of a recently parked car, or the residue of where you've been and what you've done recently. Landmarks like fire hydrants and trees are aromatic bulletin boards carrying messages of who's been by, what they've been eating, and how they're feeling. And the future is in the breeze, alerting them to something or someone approaching long before you see them. Where we see and hear something at a single moment, a dog smells an entire story, from start to finish. In some of the best examples of canine-human collaboration, dogs help us by sharing and reacting to those stories. They can respond with kindness to people in distress, or with aggression to threats, because stress and anger manifest as a cloud of hormones recognizable to the dog's nose. With the proper training, they can even alert us to invisible threats, ranging from bombs to cancer. As it turns out, humanity's best friend is not one who experiences the same things we do, but one whose incredible nose reveals a whole other world beyond our eyes.
Hopefully that gave you a good overview of how a dog's nose works if you've never thought about it before. Has anybody ever tried to take their dog for a quick walk around the block just to get them to do their thing in the morning, and you've got to get to work and all the dog wants to do is sniff, 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 sniff? It's because the dog sees the world as like his big newspaper. He can know what Fluffy down the street had for breakfast, or what the guys were doing when they were building that house, what they had for lunch, or whatever. So it's up. That's their thing, is to sniff. That's just a natural thing. And what we've done with our USAR dogs is to really train that for specific things. As that video said, we can train dogs to sniff pretty much anything, bombs, chemical, different types of chemicals, cancer is a big thing, and something I just learned about recently, the Penn Vet is teaching dogs to find antiquities. So, they're using them in law enforcement to try to help locate different types of antiquities that are being stolen or transported or whatever. But what we're looking for with our dogs is how can they find live people first, and then how can they help bring closure to a family who may have lost a loved one in a disaster of some sort, by bringing home the human remains of the victim. So dogs are trained to find scent, not necessarily trained to find a person. They find the person by following the scent. And the scent comes out in this example here. You see a victim laying on the ground. The wind comes across the victim, and it creates this cone or plume that radiates off of the victim, and that's what the dog perceives. And that's what we teach our dogs to alert on. Our dogs alert with a bark. As I mentioned before, training them to, stay with their victim by just bark, 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 bark. And what the dogs are scenting are a lot of different things. I'm going to talk about it in a second, but they're called riffs. It's cells that come off of the person, bacterial activity, secretions, oils from their hair or their clothing. That's what the dog is smelling. There's a lot of different environmental factors that come into play. Temperature comes into play when we're searching with our dogs. If the air actually warms quicker than the ground, and that can create kind of these updrafts. And then if the air cools, if it gets colder out, the scent will actually start to drop and settle into the area that we're searching, so the dog's nose will be kind of closer to the ground. If there's a big wind coming up that's too strong, it's going to actually disperse the cone or the plume, and therefore the dog's going to have to search kind of on the outsides of the search area. Humidity plays a big part in bacterial activity, much more activity when it's warm and moist, and then, like I said, temperature plays a big role in where the sun is. How the building is structured is really important. Whether there's elevator shafts, dogs, might be on the 5th floor and there might be someone down in an elevator shaft down in the basement. Dogs can perceive that scent wafting up. If there's windows opened or closed, a building like this from 9/11, this actually, created all kinds of strange scents because everything was open, there were shafts everywhere, there were stairwells, and that can definitely change how the dogs find their scent or their plume pones. What the material is, a porous material, the dogs are going to be able to scent better than in a more dense type of structure or material. We might get pooling or channeling, again, depending on what the structures are made of. This is just to reiterate that dogs are scent detectors, not people locators. This is another picture from 9/11 of the dog working. So what is scent? You guys remember Pigpen from Charlie Brown? He always seemed to have this cloud of dust coming off of him wherever he went. Well, that's not really that far from the truth. You have thousands and thousands of tiny little pieces of cells that leave your body, about 40,000 every minute, to be exact. These are like little cornflake-like bits, and as I mentioned before, they're called rafts. These are made up of bacteria, skin cell. You can also, have hormones and different enzymes that are, in these rifts that the dogs will eventually smell. And the thing about these rifts that's really cool is that they're very unique. They're unique to each individual human. So even the skin rifts from identical twins, they actually smell different. There have been tests of putting twins in opposite, like in very close proximity. Dog alerts, you pull one twin out, the dog alerts again because he smelled a different scent. So he knew there were two different people in there. Sometimes these rifts get carried on air currents, and for dogs that maybe do water searches, the rifts not only sit on the top of the water, but the air moves the rifts, and then the water moves the rifts. So somebody could be in point A where the dog isn't going to alert until point B or C. That happens in not only water searches, but it also happens in collapsed structures. Wherever the victim is, just depending on how the collapse occurs, the dog may actually not scent right where the victim is. They may actually scent where the airflow is. So airflow in this picture would run up along the bottom part of this, say, concrete slab, and where it comes out is where the dog's going to alert. Sometimes we have collapse structures that are really complex collapses, not just a slab collapse like that last one, but something like this where the victim may be located in one place, but the air currents are coming up in multiple places depending on how the air is flowing in that area and also where the openings are. So you might have two different dogs barking at two different locations, and it may be on the same victim. We don't know that until we send the rescue specialists in. So the way it normally works in a USAR deployment is, they have people who do recon. They have engineers who determine if it's a collapse. The engineers will make the determination whether or not it's safe. If we need to send the dogs by themselves, we can. Usually we like to try to go with our dogs so that someone has eyes on the dog. And then from there, once our dogs alert, then we send in a rescue team, and they have the equipment to dig down and, if need be, send in medical specialists to try to stabilize the patient and then remove them. And sometimes that removal can take a really long time, like hours and hours and hours. This is a picture of a dog named Daco. Daco was in the news quite a bit right after the Ecuadorian earthquake in 2016. This dog made so many finds. I actually forget how many finds he had of live victims that they were able to actually get out of this collapsed structure, not just this one, but multiple different collapsed structures. And the thing with Daco is, and with all of our dogs, is they love to work, and they will work and work and work. And a lot of times they don't tell you when they get into distress or when they're injured. Well, Daco was one of those dogs, highly trained, very, very healthy dog when he went into this situation. Unfortunately, it was very, very hot in April when this earthquake happened, and there weren't enough people watching the dog. The handler was, watching his footing and watching his dog, but not close enough. And Daco actually died on this search because they weren't monitoring his heat and his hydration. He died of heat stroke. Very unfortunate because he was an amazing dog. And this is why we have spotters, not only to watch our dogs, but also to watch the handlers, because the handlers very often are looking at their dogs, making sure their dogs are okay, and if they didn't have a spotter to walk with the handler, very often, not very often, but it would be potential that the handler could do something like this and just walk off of a cliff, which would be terrible, obviously. In USAR world, we normally send a canine, the canine's handler, and then a rescue specialist with them to go out and search as a team. So the rescue specialist is very often the one who's kind of acting as safety and monitoring both handler and canine. So there's different types of search. There's urban search and rescue, or USAR. There's wide area searches and water searches. There's many other different types of searches out there, but these are the three ones that we're just going to touch on here. And I've got one final video. This is an example of Rafi and I. This is a training back in New Jersey, but this is an example of how the dog would search a collapsed structure. So you see he runs up. Oh, he just ran right out of the scent cone. He's a confirmer, so he'll go in and out of it a couple of times. And then he will tell me he found someone. So he's just confirming, trying to pinpoint. And there you go. So he's confirmed. He has a victim who's an awesome victim. She is going to play with him. That's his reward. And that's what makes him so excited to do this kind of work, is he gets this wonderful reward, and I'm the bad guy. I'm going to pull him away from this. I'm going to keep him from his fun because I want him to continue to search this pile. So I think you get the gist of it. We don't need to watch him do this multiple times, but yeah, he thinks this is the most fun thing ever. And he doesn't want to give up his toy because he wants to keep playing. So luckily he's pretty good at letting me get it back from him. And then at this point I'll just send him off again and he'll do the exact same thing. You can see he's pretty agile on the pile. He has no problem running over the pile. This was several years ago. He was probably 8 or so when he did this. So he has a lot more agility then than he does now. And you can see again he found his victim. He's confirming, and now he's barking. All right. Let me, okay. So that's how the dogs work. Water searches. There's been an awful lot of flooding lately. Water searches are really more complicated than building searches are, again, because Water is a three-dimensional problem. It can be conducted in very adverse conditions, like not usually happening on beautiful sunny days like this when you're searching a flooded area. Very often you're dealing with, adverse temperature and different kinds of blinds within the water. Water's not always clear, and like I said before, sometimes the scent of the individuals is on top of the water and it moves, so the water moves as well. And sometimes people are stuck down below the water, and it takes a while because of the current for the dog to be able to pinpoint. Wide area searches, this is probably what most people are familiar with when dogs go out to search. Someone wanders off from the nursing home, so they, give the dog a little scent article and say, "Here, go find Mr. Jones. He's wandered away." And so the dog will trail the person by smelling, an article that had smelled like that person. Sometimes, hunters get lost, and you've got to go into the wilderness to find the person. Usually there's a scent article involved, but not always. Sometimes dogs just air scent, which is what the dogs do in the USAR world, is they're air scenting. Sometimes dogs have to drag their nose along the ground to find the scent. Sometimes they have to lift it up a little bit further to find the scent. But wide area is a different world because you're dealing with, things like this, a lot of not just rock debris, but a lot of vegetation debris as well as a lot of the critters. We have that in the urban world as well, especially in floods. You get a lot of angry snakes and alligators that have been displaced. They get a little pissed off that they've had to move violently very often, and so they're not very happy when we come across them. Dogs in the wilderness not only have to deal with that, but they have to deal with moose and bears sometimes and whatnot. So there's a lot of different types of not only obstacles, but things that can harm both them and their handler. So the last couple slides here are just some examples of some of different responses and deployments that some of my friends have been on. This was from the Surfside collapse that happened in June of this year, where 97 people died. There were several people pulled out initially from this collapse, but most people were not pulled out live, and it was thanks to these dogs that they were able to bring closure to a lot of these families by bringing their loved ones home. This is a picture from 9/11. The last remaining live person pulled from the debris was a woman by the name of Janelle Guzman McMillan. She was trapped for 27 hours, and she was actually found by a dog. This picture is from Kathmandu. This is USAID went in to search in this area, and this is just an example of how the dogs search by themselves. So you can see all the rescuers down there on the bottom. Everybody was very quiet. They let the dog go in and search, and he actually found a young teenager in this, and the teenager actually said that when he was pulled out, when he was inside this collapsed structure, that he was talking to two other survivors. So they knew that there was the potential for these other two people to still be alive. So they sent in another dog to try to locate those victims. So dogs can work in tandem with the victims to try to find other survivors. This is from the Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. This is a picture of a handler out of Colorado. This dog's name is Patella, and Patella actually went initially after Typhoon Haiyan hit, and Patella is a human remain detection dog. When he was there initially, he had several finds, but the conditions became really bad, so they pulled all the dogs off, and they actually brought them back about 6 months later. As you can see, this debris field, this is 6 months after the initial typhoon, and Patella actually had about 85 finds. All total, he had about 100 finds from when he was there at first to when he went back 6 months later. So that's just incredible. That just shows you how long scent can last and how long dogs can alert on scent. These two pictures are from the Washington mudslide up in Oso when the whole town of Oso was taken out. John Kane with the Yellow Lab was one of my teammates. Daisy, his dog, was a dog that he had had with him in Afghanistan, and when he came back from Afghanistan, he retrained her to be a search and rescue dog and human remains detection dog. And then the other dog is AJ and Kersey. And Kersey was the dog in one of those 9/11 pictures. So Kersey was pretty old by the time Oso happened, and they both had finds on the pile. You can see this Oso pile. This wasn't really a pile. There were some piles, but this is what a lot of Oso was mud and bogs. People, I don't know if you can see on John's boots, they actually had to tape their boots to their legs because they would go through these bogs and it would just suck their boots off. It was so muddy and so deep. There were times when they actually had to pull people out that got stuck. The responders that got stuck, they actually had to pull them out. So it was really important that these dogs went in. And it's incredible because if you've ever seen a mudslide, you see how it sets up. It's like snow when it sets up. It sets up hard. And it's, very dense. It's not very porous. So it takes a while for the dogs to be able to alert. But they found everyone eventually. And then canines can be used for not just finding people and their remains, but also for comfort. Both of these pictures were out of 9/11. Handlers, as you can well imagine, after working a pile and finding, human remains or not finding anything, knowing that people may be there, can you imagine the emotional toil that could take on someone? And they found that dogs are just absolutely amazing at providing comfort, not only to the responders, but also to the public, who may come by and be watching. That happened a lot in Surfside. And that's what this picture is from Surfside. A lot of people came to just watch the rescue. Well, they were hoping for rescue, but to come and watch the searching. And a lot of the dogs were used for, comfort dogs for a lot of those folks that were, perhaps waiting for information of a loved one. These pictures here are a friend of mine from Indiana, Task Force, Deanna. This is her dog. As you can see, she said she literally fell asleep in that chair, and her dog Orion just climbed up on top of her and gave her a big hug, and he stayed there the whole time she slept. And I don't know if you know about, kind of the hormonal response that occurs when petting a dog, but there's been a lot of studies out there that have said, that your body actually develops a level of oxytocin and dopamine as well as some serotonin, and these are kind of the feel-good hormones that our body produces, and just the act of petting a dog can increase, especially the dopamine, especially the serotonin, just the love hormones can help calm people when they're in a stressful situation. That's why a lot of airports are starting to bring dogs in, just to kind of calm people down in lines. Anyway, and I love this picture. There's several pictures of the rescuers hanging out by the ocean, as you, again, can well imagine. The stress that this creates and the emotional upheaval that this can create. Sometimes just looking at the ocean with your best friend is what can get you through so that you can get to your next work period. All right, that is pretty much all I have. Sorry, I don't know if we have time for questions. Do we have time for questions? And does anyone have any?
We do have one quick question, if you don't mind, Barb.
Sure.
So someone here is asking, for water operations specifically, is there special training or equipment that's needed for training before actually starting an operation?
For the dogs, you mean, to train the dogs? If that's
yes.
Yes. So the way I trained mine for water ops was we would put a diver in the water, and then when the dog would alert, the diver would come up with like a hot dog or something as a reward versus the play side. Sometimes we would hide the divers under docks or under things so that the dogs wouldn't see the bubbles from their scuba gear, so that we truly knew they were alerting on their rafts. Did that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
I wanna say, I know we are coming up on time here, but Barb, your presentation was just incredible. I think that there's so much we don't know about these dogs and the handlers, and just to kind of hear from your firsthand account, just the work and the incredible experience that you folks have and these dogs have is really, really humbling, I think, from my perspective. And I have to say, the copious pictures of all of the dogs definitely made my afternoon, so thank you for that. Any excuse to look at dogs, I'm here for, so thank you, Barb.
You are absolutely welcome.
So, like you said, we are coming up on time here, but if folks do have questions, feel free to shoot us an email, and we'll make sure it gets over to Barb. And today's session was recorded again, so if there's something that you missed and you want to go back and watch it, we'll make sure that folks are able to access the link afterwards. Thank you again, Barb. Do you have any kind of final words before we kick everybody out of here?
Nope. Just feel free to email me. You can get your email from Taylor. I'm happy to chat with anyone. I can chat forever about dogs. And if you're ever in the Utah area and want to come out and watch us when we're working, we're happy to have you. So make sure you get in touch. But thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Good. Of course, I will start booking my plane ticket to Utah right now.
Love it.
All right, everybody. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you all. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.